Welcome to Assembly Bethesda on Air. This is Hayne Fogarty. And today we're really sitting with a question that has profoundly unsettled philosophers, brought comfort to the broken, and frankly, drawn both ridicule and reverence across centuries. It's the philosophical case for miracles. Now, I'm not talking about sensational stories or heated debate stage arguments. Instead, we're diving into the quieter, deeper question of whether the world we inhabit actually has room for the unexpected intervention of God. I mean, think about that for a moment. I want to begin in the shadows, if you will. Picture for a moment an old, grand cathedral at dusk. The last light filters through those magnificent colored glass windows, painting the stone floor in rich reds and deep blues. The air is cool, and you can practically feel the silence having weight. In that kind of space, doesn't the modern demand for immediate explanation just soften? You can almost physically feel the difference between a world that is merely a machine and a world that might still be addressed by its maker. That feeling, of course, isn't proof, but it's an invitation. An invitation to think more carefully about what we truly mean when we say something is possible or impossible.
Now, most of us, I think it's fair to say, have inherited a picture of reality that feels like it runs on these incredibly closed circuits, right? Causes produce effects, patterns hold, and if something appears to break that pattern, our first instinct is to look harder for some missing cause. This habit has given us medicine, engineering, and countless daily comforts. It's a good habit, really. But here's the thing, it becomes a bad philosophy when it hardens into the absolute claim that this pattern can never, ever be interrupted by anything outside itself. That claim isn't actually forced by the data, is it? It's really a decision about the kind of universe you and I are willing to live in. So let's consider what a miracle actually is, particularly in the Christian sense. It's not some random glitch. It's not nature just misbehaving for no reason at all. A miracle, my friends, is a sign. It's a moment when the ordinary flow of things is gently, or perhaps dramatically, redirected so that something of God's character and purpose becomes visible. Think about it. The stilling of the storm, as told in Scripture, isn't mainly about weather control, is it? It's about the presence of the one whom even the wind and the waves obey. The empty tomb isn't mainly about a body that went missing. It's about the defeat of death itself and the beginning of a new creation. The philosophical weight of these events rests less on whether we can reproduce them in a lab and more on whether the larger story they belong to is coherent and true. One of the oldest objections we hear, and it's a powerful one, is that miracles violate the laws of nature. But here's what I find fascinating. The force of that objection really depends on what we think these laws of nature actually are. If the laws are rigid chains that bind even God, then yes, a miracle would seem like a contradiction. But what if instead the laws are descriptions of the regular ways God usually upholds the world? Then a miracle is simply God choosing, for a very particular reason, to uphold it in a different way for a time. The regularity is absolutely real, yes, but the freedom of the one who established that regularity is also undeniably real. There's no contradiction in a free creator acting freely within his own creation. The true contradiction would be a creator who is somehow locked out of his own work, wouldn't you agree?
Let's move on to another common objection, probability. People often argue that miracles are rare, therefore they're improbable, and thus we shouldn't believe reports of them. But is rarity truly impossibility? Think about it. The birth of a child is rare, relative to the number of ordinary days. A lifelong faithful love is rare, relative to fleeting attractions. What's interesting is that the rare things often carry the deepest meaning, don't they? To treat rarity as a reason for automatic disbelief is, in my view, to confuse frequency with possibility. The philosophical question isn't how often the extraordinary happens. It's whether the very structure of reality allows the extraordinary at all. And then there's the matter of testimony. Across centuries, people have claimed to have encountered the miraculous. Sure, some claims are clearly false or mistaken,
but others come from careful, sober people who had nothing to gain and often much to lose by speaking out. The Christian tradition doesn't ask us to accept every reported wonder. Instead, it asks us to notice a pattern centered on the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, and continuing wherever need and faith meet. To dismiss that entire pattern in advance is to decide, before examining the evidence, what kind of world we are prepared to accept. That decision, my friends, is philosophical, and it is most certainly not neutral.
Now, let's consider something else: the ordinary strangeness of consciousness. You and I are collections of cells and electrical signals, and yet we experience an inner life filled with thought, desire, memory, and profound wonder. No one, truly no one, has produced a complete account of how matter becomes mind. The gap remains. Some treat it as temporary, something science will eventually fill in. Others, though, notice that this gap has a particular character. It's the appearance of something that looks back at the world from inside. If the physical order can give rise to awareness, then the physical order is far more mysterious than a simple closed system of particles would suggest, isn't it? Once that mystery is admitted, the further possibility that this same order might, on occasion, respond to a different kind of agency becomes less shocking, wouldn't you say? It expands our understanding of what reality could encompass.
The heart of the philosophical case for miracles is actually quite simple when you boil it down. If the universe is the free creation of a personal God, then the unexpected is always possible. Nature isn't a sealed machine, you see. It's a living order that can be spoken to, interrupted, and yes, healed. The same power that sustains the stars can, for reasons of love, calm a fever, open a closed heart, or roll away a stone. The dignity of that claim doesn't rest on proving every reported event. It rests on whether the alternative, a universe sealed against its maker, is actually more reasonable. Many have preferred the sealed universe because it feels safer, more manageable, a bit more predictable. But for others, the open universe feels more honest and, frankly, more hopeful. Consider this. Miracles don't destroy the natural order. They reveal that the natural order was never the final word. The final word, my friends, is older, deeper, and profoundly free. It's about recognizing that deeper reality.
Now, this doesn't mean we abandon careful thinking. Not at all. It means we refuse to shrink careful thinking into a cage. Reason can absolutely examine evidence, weigh testimony, notice patterns, and still leave ample room for the God who speaks in the storm and walks on the water. The philosophical case for miracles is the case for a world large enough to contain both the measurable and the mysterious, both the law and the Lord of the law. I want to linger for a moment on the emotional and spiritual texture of this question. When someone you love is sick, or when a situation seems closed on every side, the possibility of miracle isn't some abstract theory, is it? It's a living hope. That hope can be misused, sure, but it can also become a quiet trust that the one who made the world is still free to act within it. There's also the question of consistency. If we accept that God created the world and continues to sustain it, then the further claim that God can act in particular ways within that world isn't an add-on, it's a natural extension. The real discontinuity would be a God who creates and then withdraws completely. The Christian vision, you see, is more intimate. God is present, free, and capable of making the ordinary yield to the extraordinary when love requires it.
Now, some will inevitably say that accepting miracles opens the door to superstition and chaos, but I'd strongly argue that the Christian understanding of miracles isn't chaotic at all. Instead, it's deeply ordered by the very character of God. Miracles serve specific purposes: revelation, healing, judgment, and the advance of the kingdom. They are meaningful, not random. The same God who established nature's regularities is the God who, on rare and purposeful occasions, sets those regularities aside for a greater good. There's coherence here, you see, not confusion. Then others will claim that modern knowledge has simply made miracles unnecessary. It's true, we understand far more about disease, weather patterns, and psychology than earlier generations did.
Yet greater knowledge of secondary causes doesn't by any means eliminate the possibility of a primary cause. Understanding how a fever works doesn't prove that God cannot heal it. Understanding how storms form doesn't prove that God cannot still them. Knowledge of the mechanisms simply describes the system more carefully. It doesn't fundamentally close the system. The philosophical question, I believe, remains wide open for us to explore.
I think of the long tradition of Christian thinkers, truly brilliant minds, who have wrestled with these matters without losing either their faith or their rigorous intellectual honesty. They didn't treat miracles as some embarrassing leftovers from a pre-scientific age, They treated them as a vital part of the larger truth about a free and personal God. Their arguments weren't always identical, but they shared a common, profound confidence that the world is not a closed box. And that confidence, my friends, is still absolutely available to us today. They understood that carefully examined reason could still leave room for wonder. These thinkers weren't afraid to ask hard questions, but they also refused to limit reality to only what was immediately measurable or explainable. For them, miracles weren't a problem to be solved, but a pointer to a deeper, more expansive truth about the universe we inhabit and the God who created it. In the end, the philosophical case for miracles is less about winning a debate and more about refusing to shrink the world. It's about keeping the windows open. It's about allowing the possibility that the God who spoke light into being can still speak into our darkness. In the quiet of an old church, with the candles burning and the stone holding its centuries of prayer, that possibility feels less like a theory and more like a very real presence. As we close today, I invite you to sit with this question, rather than rush to settle it. Let the shadows do their work. Let the light that comes through the colored glass remind you that the ordinary can become the place of encounter. The case for miracles is ultimately the case for a world that is still capable of surprise, still held by a free and loving God. Thank you for joining me today. As always, it is a pleasure to spend this time with you. God bless, and until next time, courage. If you like what I do here, head on over to www.assembly